Hi, it's Kevin. Welcome to Relationship Ready. Today, we're going to talk about my issues and your issues and how our issues together clash and push on each other. So, what am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about me versus you and the work to shift from me versus you to me and you. Because when we get in conflicts and we get in challenges, and when somebody just rubs us the wrong way, especially if it's our partner or somebody who we are building on relationships to, our friends, our family, they rub us the wrong way. And why do they do that? So we're going to look at part of why that happens, and then what do we do about that? Because there's lots of things that we can do. So let's jump in and see what buttons get pushed. So when I say buttons, those are triggers. Those are things that all imagine specific buttons all over us and all inside of us. And what those are. Because what those buttons are the personal reactions we have to past experiences. The personal reactions we have to past experiences. If we've had what our brain creates, a negative past experience, a trauma, a conflict, something that makes the hair stand up on the back of our neck, then if there is a similar thing that is happening, or if our brain tells us it's a similar thing, but maybe it's not, then that's when we get triggered. Because our buttons get pushed. Just like a machine, as a human being, those buttons get pushed and create reactions in ourselves, in our fight or flight response. They shut down the front part of our brain, that's our logical thinking, and delve us down and down into that water slide that is our emotions. And when our emotions are so triggered like that, we don't think rationally. But we are responsible for our own actions. And the work is to be able to identify what buttons get pushed and take responsibility for them ourselves. Because it's not our responsibility that others push our buttons, but our reactions when those get pushed by others is our responsibility. So they get pushed because it feels personal. So let's look at what personal means. Personal is private, just involving ourselves. It's our secrets that we don't share that carry blame and shame. And it is our boundaries of privacy. Because the difference between privacy and secrecy is shame. It's appropriate to have boundaries. It's appropriate to have privacy. But if we've been hurt and our boundaries have been violated, and we have either created ourselves or been made to feel bad about that, that's when it becomes secrecy, and that's when it becomes shame. And that's when we get pushed and triggered and react emotionally. So let's take a minute to sink that in, because everything can be a trigger or a button. This conversation, whatever's come up in your head and in your memories and your brain when I'm talking, may be hitting buttons. But those are each of our responsibilities. I, as your partner in conversation right now, am responsible for what I say and what reactions I get, if I take them on. But I'm not responsible for causing your reactions. Those feelings are the buttons that I push. So, we've talked a little bit about what's personal. Let's go the other end about what's impersonal or not personal. The reactions we have because of our buttons are not personal. to others. They're not personal to us in partnership. They're not personal in friendship. They're not personal in relationship. Unless we participate in that original experience that created the button. Now, that may be a button for negative, what we define as negative emotions of hurt and pain and sadness. It may also be a button that causes joy and excitement and love. Because you know there's those people who just look at you the right way, or that certain type that's like, oh, I want to be more of that. The tongue comes out, it's succulent. Those are buttons too. Those aren't the traumatic buttons. Those are the buttons of joy that create serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine, release the oxytocin in our body of the love of connection. So we're full of all these buttons. But the work is figuring out which are our buttons and what is our responsibility. Figuring out what is my problem and what is your problem. Because nobody wants to take responsibility for other people's problems. But people have a hard time, and we are wired to not take responsibility for things that we are not sure are ours yet. So we need to do the work to figure out whether those things are ours. And how do we do that work? In each moment, we slow down and see what our reaction is. Sit with those feelings. If somebody says to you, hey, we're running late, you always late? And you get a reaction, yeah, you might be running late, but take a moment to go, okay, I'm feeling the appropriate amount of reaction to this situation. And take responsibility for it. If you are causing the running late in that moment, and your partner is frustrated with you, then sure, that's yours, not theirs. Their reaction and how intense they are is their button. But if you are overreacting to that and feeling like, oh, they're blaming me for everything, this is just another example, they can't stand me, they've hurt me, this is damaging, this is hard, this is too much pressure, I can't handle this, then it's not about the situation, it's about something from your past that is hitting that button. And sit with that feeling and just go, oh, this is a stronger feeling than for this situation. This is about me. This isn't about you. If it's a stronger feeling than the situation. And then, when you get that feeling, learn what button that's hitting. Is that hitting the button of insecurity? Is that hitting the button of not enough? Is that hitting the button of victimization and pain? Is that hitting the button of being able to be not in achievement, or lonely, or grief? What is that button for you? Now, you may not have time in that moment to reflect on that, but if you keep track of or look back on the moments when you overreact, that's where your buttons are. And luckily, although we're getting triggered all the time and there's buttons that are getting pushed all the time, they're generally buttons are a handful of things that make us really react and overreact. So if you miss one, there'll be another one, guaranteed. And you can explore that one. And figure out the process of that is what will get you to figure out what your buttons are, what your partner's buttons are, if they self-reflect. You can't decide for them what their buttons are, but they can decide what they are and take feedback from you. And then, when you know what your triggers are and what your partner's triggers are, you can have conversations about me and you instead of me versus you. Because me versus you is the blame game, is you caused me to do this. If you were just not doing it the right way, then I wouldn't react like this. Instead of, oh, my button of feeling inadequate was pressed when you said, you got the wrong directions here. So how do we solve this together? Let's find the right direction. Support me in that. Be aware that I have that button of inadequacy or loneliness or grief. And then in a place where we're not in argument, have those conversations and go, was that button again? Yeah, it was. How can I support you in that? To be much more emotionally healthy and much more ready to be present in your relationships. So, as we've talked, are there any buttons that were pressed? If they were, that was not my intention. But our buttons get pressed all the time. So take that as valuable information, as a gift for yourself that you take and give yourself, not from me, to be aware of those buttons. And notice if they happen again. And if they do, they're attached to something that you need to do some work on. And doing some work on it is sharing it, identifying it, breathing into it, sitting with it, talking to your partner, talking to your friends, talking to your therapist, and then figuring out what are your general buttons. You probably have a handful of them. Everybody can have a million of them or a handful, because those million of them all tie into the handful. And the handful, if you work on those, the million of them get much easier. And you get much less triggered. And you feel much more confident in handling things. So what are your buttons now, during this, and in general? And take that with you and realize that most people are not personally invested in hurting you or giving you joy. The people closest to you in your circle of friends, your companions, and your supports, they're very invested. But they're invested in building you up. Those who are not invested in building you up might be, but they might be triggering you. So help communicate with them about how they're being triggered and what that's doing. And if they want to support you, they'll help you work through it. And they'll be more aware of working together. So you can be more me and you and less me versus you. Thanks for watching. Figure out how to address your primary triggers, your primary buttons, and what those are in you. And those are only going to help you in your partnership. So you can be more relationship ready. Thanks for watching. Take some time and subscribe. And we will see you next time on Relationship Ready.